Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Meredith Phillips. I'm a writer, reader, and bunny mama. So remember the last video where I was like, sorry if my nose is red, I'm a little bit like allergy and sneeze girl. Well, today is actually the same day that I'm filming this video. I'm trying to film a little bit ahead because I have my parents coming in town and I'm not gonna be able to film that weekend, so I'm trying to do some stuff ahead. Anyway, apologies again if I'm looking a little watery. Allergies are the worst. So you've been working on a story for a long time. Maybe it's been months, maybe it's been years, and you are at a point where you really just want to put it aside. So how can you tell when it's time to put a story aside for the foreseeable future, or whether you're just having a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, and you just need to keep pressing forward with it? I have 5 things to share with you today that will hopefully help you determine whether you should continue pushing forward and working on a story, or if it's just time to put it away and start something different. So the number one thing I would say is, if you've been working on a story and you do not love any aspect of it any longer. Presumably, when you started a story, you loved some aspect of it, whether it was the plot, the characters, the world, whatever it might have been, but you've gotten to a point now where you dislike all of the things that you originally loved. Maybe you've gotten really bored with the plot. Maybe you've realized that the characters are really two-dimensional and boring. Maybe the things about the story that initially really excited you no longer excite you. If there's nothing in the story that you can find and hold on to as a thing that you love, then it's probably time to put the story aside. The second thing I would tell you to consider is what type of story you're writing and what type of writer you are. There are some stories that you might have mulling in your brain, but if you're a beginner writer, it might not be the best time to start a story if it's way beyond your skill level as a writer. I talked about this a little bit in my video from last week. I'll link that up here if you want to check it out. But one of the things that I realized with the first story I was trying to write is it was way beyond what I could possibly do any kind of good job on. Now, obviously, when you write a first draft, there's going to be major problems in it, but the story itself should be something that you can manage as a writer. The first story idea I had a lot of world building, fantasy elements, magic system, a whole different set of cultures and groups of people. The story had multiple POVs, and that is a lot. For an experienced writer, that's a lot. And so for a very beginner writer, that kind of a story is incredibly difficult to try to put together and map out. So if you've gotten to a point where you realize that the story you're trying to tell is simply beyond where you are as a writer, put it aside. The third thing I would suggest considering if you are wondering if you should put your story aside is whether the story you're trying to tell is in a genre that you also read. I firmly believe that if you don't read fantasy, you should not be writing fantasy novels. If you don't read mysteries, you should not be writing a mystery novel. Each of these different types of genres have reader expectations. If you pick up a mystery book, you as the reader are going to expect that the mystery is solved by the end of the book. If the mystery isn't solved, you're going to be pretty pissed off. If you're a romance reader, you expect that the end of the book will have a happy ending. If it's not a happy ending, number one, it's not a romance, but number two, if you've marketed that book as a romance and it doesn't have a happy ending, you are going to have a lot of pissed off readers on your hands. So you need to know the genre expectations, and if you're trying to write in a genre that you don't read in, you're not going to know those expectations, they're not going to be in your book, and it's not going to be a good representation of that genre. The other piece of that that's sort of tangentially related is if you are trying to write in a genre that you don't like. I've heard from so many literary agents who get query letters from people saying, you know, YA fantasy is a bunch of trash, but my YA fantasy book is going to bring the genre back and, you know, be amazing. And that type of attitude is the worst crap attitude I've ever heard of in my life. If you don't like any or very few of the books in the genre you're trying to write in, then maybe you don't like that genre very much. And if you find that that is the case with your book, I would definitely put it aside. The fourth thing to evaluate is your attitude toward the writing. If you sit down and you feel like you're having to force yourself to write this book, the book is full of cliches, tropes that you haven't put any kind of spin on, and it's not like that for a day or two, but this is like weeks and months on end, maybe it's time to put it aside. Unless you're an author who's on deadline and you're being paid to produce something, most of us here are just writers, and if you're forcing yourself to continue writing a story that is just not gelling for you, then why? Why? We don't have to keep doing it if we don't want to. If you feel like your story isn't offering anything new or unique, or that you've got a cool twist on an old trope, then maybe it's time to put the story aside. The fifth and final thing that I would evaluate for yourself is whether the writing of that story is making you not want to write anything. If you feel so stuck and frustrated and annoyed and angry at the story you're trying to write that it makes you want to give up on writing completely, don't keep working on that thing. Put it aside. Work on a new idea, get some new things going. Don't let a project pull you so far down that the craft itself is becoming unpalatable for you. That to me is a really dangerous place to be in. I've been there before. And even after I put that story aside, it kind of took me a while to get back into writing because I was so frustrated and annoyed with this project that I'd finally dumped. One quick note here, putting aside a story does not mean that you will never return to it. Sometimes, like I was talking about in the second point, if the story is just above your skill level, it doesn't mean you're never going to be at that skill level. Maybe you just need to work on the writing craft a little bit longer, and in a year or two, you could return to that story and really do it justice. So don't feel like putting a story aside necessarily means that you failed or that you're giving up or anything like that. This to me is a very practical choice that you need to make. Putting a story aside just means it's not the best story for you to be trying to tell right now. So that's what I have to share with you today. Have you ever been in a position where you've just had to put a story away for a while? Let us know in the comments what brought about that decision, what helps you make that decision. Do you ask yourself certain kinds of questions to evaluate how a story is going? What does that look like for you? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content from me, click the subscribe button. I post videos on Tuesdays and Fridays. You can also find me over on Instagram at Meredith Phillips Writes. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. So I have 5 things to share with you today. What was that? Oh gosh. Parts that are connected in a little bit of ways. No.